in such events, it can be a little overwhelming of what do you need to do and what's your next step. So it's four steps that we've identified. One is get organized, which we're going to talk about tonight. The next session is on building a customer base. In the following week, we're going to talk about strategy and managing your money as well as yourself. And at the completion of the 4-point series, you will have a well-rounded knowledge of exactly where you are in your business and what do you need to do to continue with your business and grow, particularly in this current age that we're in. I do not like to say going back to normal because I think that will be, there's no such thing, but there's definitely ways you can thrive in a pandemic era and in the post-pandemic era. So we're going to go over a lot of terminology and requirements. And so at some point, sometimes you might feel like it's a little bit of a word jumble, but trust me, we'll make sure you'll be able to digest it by the end of the presentation. I must say, as a disclaimer, that this presentation is for informational purposes, and any exact requirements will be based upon your business type and condition. And as part of the boot camp, we're in the Congress Heights Community Training and Development Corporation is offering one-on-one sessions, and so we'll have an opportunity to do a deeper dive one-on-one to get a better idea of your circumstances. So from that kind of jumbled words, these are the core elements we're going to cover in today's presentation. So instead of just starting randomly, I kind of set a starting point for you. Then we're going to jump right into business registration, licensing and permits. Then we talk about insurance, policies and procedures, and then we're going to close with financial record keeping. So, being a teacher for a long time, kind of one thing I like to start off is telling you the why. So here are just the top 4 reasons that I like to keep in mind of why you need to get organized. Number 1, you want to reduce your risk, and particularly risk of financial loss. If you're not organized, you might be denied opportunities because information is inaccurate or not up to date. You may have loss of protections. You'd be surprised how your insurance coverage is tied to making sure your physical address is correct and your business activities are correct. And then there might be other penalties, fines, and fees as a result of being out of compliance. Number 2, there's financing, certification, special programs, all that require having your business and financial documents in order. So if you're looking to grow, most times you're going to be wanting to acquire some of these kinds of programming to help you grow. And so you need to have your information in order. Also, that some people don't really think about, but it builds trust when your information is accurate, particularly with your customers, employees, and partners. So please keep that in mind, that accuracy is just, and being compliant is really part of the overall picture of doing good business. And then lastly, because I do work a lot in the strategy space, it is a strategic asset. Organizations that have their stuff together, so to speak, have their papers and accuracy all in order, make good decisions faster. And in business, that's the name of the game. Be able to make the best decisions you can because you have access to your internal information. And as a result, you're able to take advantage of opportunities. Okay, so now that we've covered that, so keep that in mind as you go through this process. Again, don't get overwhelmed because it is a way we've broken this down so that it can be digestible. So we're going to start off with the starting point in business registration. So here we are. Where do you start to get organized? Here's my take on it. And every consultant has their own kind of spin on it, but this is what I found to work with a lot of clients. So I always start by asking you to gather your historical and business information. So number 1, your start date. I know it seems simple. Why would I need that information? But you'd be surprised the number of applications and registration forms that's the first thing they ask. So, besides the name of the company, it's like, when did you start? Because then they start to ask, what is the supporting documentation around that? If you've been in business a while, You need to gather that information as well as all your business names, particularly if you've had maybe a trade, you've changed your name, or you've had trade names. You need to have that information handy. Also, you need to have the social security number for the owner or the business employer identification number, typically referred to as the EIN. I strongly discourage using the social security number because that means in every form and application, you're exposing your personal information. So it's really best that you are able to get your EIN number from the IRS, but it is the identifying number that most agencies use to recognize a business. Next, you need a description of your business and your products and services. And you need to have a good idea of all of your products and services because that's going to drive, along with having your NICS codes, which we're going to talk about next, that's going to drive the type of license you need and any other requirements that you need to be in compliance. Your business activity is a strong driver for a lot of the compliance that you have to meet. Next is your NICS code. So most applications, again, besides the name and EIN, they will ask what industry are you in? And the government likes to use the NICS codes because it's a classification system where all the industries are broken out. And I included the link to the census.gov website where the codes are located, and it's easy to use. You can put in just a phrase of what your business does, and it will give you a variety of codes that might match, and you can choose which one best suits you. You may be in one or more than one industry. It can happen. Also, you need to be mindful that how you view your business may not be how the federal government or local government views your business. So this is the way you get on the same page with them in terms of the type of business you have. And then there's some other info you might want to pull together if you have it. If not, you might be on the journey to applying for these as well as this process. So it's the SAM number, which is for the System for Award Management, and Dun & Bradstreet number. These are typically for organizations and businesses that do business with local or federal government. But nonetheless, if you have applied for these in the past, they have to be updated regularly in terms of your information to remain valid. So we got to have that at hand in case those are the things we need to change or update. So next to the historical information, you want to have your contact info. You'd be surprised how many people have not kept up with their physical and mailing address to their insurance company or to their registration. And your address is critical because that's where the agency is going to send you any information about your license, your certifications, etc. So critical you have that handy, and you want to make sure that those are updated regularly. So you got to have all the owners. So as owners change, your information needs to be updated with various agencies, and of course, it's always a fee, but we'll go through that later. You might have an update on your registered agent. And the registered agent is the person you have designated to be the chief contact person for the organization. So when you say you have a registered agent, you provide the mailing address, and that's where official notices will be sent. I know an organization that was out of compliance simply because the mail went to the registered agency, but they never updated the mailing address, so they weren't getting their notices, and so their license became in jeopardy. Phone, fax, and email address. Always, right, remember you got to keep those current for agencies. I've included website and social media accounts because more and more I'm seeing applications where they're asking for that information. And just to give you an example, if you're applying for your Dun & Bradstreet number, they ask for the website address. It's not a requirement, but it helps to verify to them that you're an actual operating business along with other information. So one thing to emphasize here, that inaccurate information or a change in information might require a new business license, registration, insurance, etc. So it's very critical that at the starting point, that you have this information that's readily accessible to you. Yeah, of course, kept securely, and have it available for when you're going through the remainder of the documents we're going to cover so that you can update appropriately. Okay. So now you got that starting point under our belt, let's talk about registration, because that tends to be the first step when you're starting a business, but that's where I like to go to when we're talking about how do we maintain business operations, making sure everything's in compliance. So when you're talking about registration or jurisdiction, they're really asking you to submit the paperwork to tell us who legally owns the business. And so that's submitted to DCRA. One thing you might not realize, but that you should be happy about, in DC, they have forms for the various types of legal structure that makes it very easy to update this information. So it's not necessary you talk to an attorney, but based upon the type of business you might want to. And so we have articles of organization, articles of incorporation, statement of qualifications, and those are varied for LLCs, corporation, and limited liability partnerships. There are other types of ownership structures that get far more complex, but these tend to be the typical of most small businesses. Just to note that if you are operating your business as a sole proprietor or just a simple general partnership or unincorporated nonprofit or any other special entity, you may not need to register. And so registration is not required. And that's fine, but that just realize it doesn't free you from maybe any tax implications or licensing requirements. You're just saying that those particular structures may not need to be registered with DC government. As you can see here, the highlighted item, legal ownership structures have tax implications that we're going to talk about in the next slide. But to register your business on the tax side of things, you want to have your employment identification number, and that's from the IRS. And then on the local level, you're going to have another business tax identification number from the Office of Tax and Revenue. And I've included the forms for these particular, for getting your identification number. It's called the FR 500. So you want to make sure your ID number is still valid. So you can always double check with those two agencies. A very important point to add here under registration is the clean hands certificate. And this is an affidavit in which you're saying you owe less than $100 to DC government. And I put it up front here because it is required for license or permit applications. So most times, any other business you want to do with DC government or in terms of get your business set up and structure and operation, usually requires a clean hands certificate. So it's something you have to be mindful of, that you don't owe, and that you have to access the certificate maybe on a regular basis. I do recommend that if you're needing to update any of these, particularly like the legal ownership structure, you download the forms first from the website, review, and then gather the information before completing the form online. Everybody's moved to an online format, and DC government has done a really good job of having a portal, which all this work can be done online. This was even before the pandemic. So I have to give DC government credit because I work with both Maryland and Virginia.
Make your computer.
And so it's very important to download the forms so you know exactly what information you need to gather, because not all application portals will save it in the middle of completing. So you want to make sure you have everything there and it's accurate so you can input the information rather easily before submitting your application. And of course, most times there is some fee for these for registration, except for the IRS and the tax ID numbers, those you can get for free. But everything else, registering your legal ownership structure, will require a cost. So operating a business and maintaining a business has some just basic financial implications as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, so there's some tax implications for registration. So I just wanted to outline the most common and the ones that you might need to consider. There's some ones that most small businesses don't need to have or be concerned with, but it's just in case. Like I said, it's all going to vary by the type of business you have. So there's sales and use tax, and that's collected from purchasers. So we all are familiar when we buy something in a store, there's a sales tax. So as a business, you're required to collect and provide that funds to DC government, collecting on behalf of the purchasers. There's a personal property tax. The name is not quite fitting, it's not your personal property, it's the business's property. And there's a tax on the value of the items you have purchased for the business. So, for example, furniture, computers, and even for DC, it's books, whatever is used for the purpose of business. There's a tax associated with that, and so you will have to pay based upon the value. It is somewhat of a depreciating, says that the value depreciates, so does the tax. But you got to understand that as you operate your business, you need to keep really great records of all the things you purchased for the business to use for the business. DC has an excise tax, and that's for those businesses that are dealing with alcohol, tobacco, motor fuel. So there's a couple of other categories that falls in. As you can see, most small businesses probably won't have to do that, at least here in the retail of alcohol and tobacco. There's a gross receipts tax. So there's a tax imposed on the gross receipts based upon the industry services. And they tend to be the utility companies and the heating oil delivery, most times far outside the scope of most small businesses, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. But after that, there are two other ones you definitely need to be aware of, particularly when you have employees. So there's an employer withholding. So this is the amount that gets deducted from, if we all remember, working for somebody else. This gets deducted from our wages and it's collected, and it's the responsibility of the business to pay the exact amount of the withholding to DC government. Let me warn you that companies have gotten in trouble for not paying the appropriate amount to DC government, and not because they withhold it, but then they use the funds for other activities. So you cannot do that. So be mindful. Once you have employees, you now are entering into the realm of employee withholding, and you have unemployment taxes. So with at least one employee, full or part-time, you're required to register Part 5 of the combined registration form. So if you did not have employees when you submitted your FR 500 to the Office of Tax and Revenue, when you do have employees, you need to go back and register for that section, because that's going to register your business for unemployment taxes. You must file quarterly tax and wage reports. So you can see with just this small outline of the business taxes, you need to have excellent record keeping and accounting systems in place. Many of the accounting software will help you with all of this, but you have to set up the system to recognize this is what you need to do for your business. And then you need to keep the appropriate records for all of these transactions. Right? As I said earlier, there were tax implications based upon the legal structure of your business. So the Washington Economic Partnership has a very excellent publication called DC Doing Business Guide. And in there, they have I thought it was a great chart outlining the implications tax-wise for each type of ownership structure. So if you're sole proprietor, yes, there's an advantage of being a sole proprietor because it's easy to run. There's a lot less paperwork involved. And the sole proprietors, you can pay self-employment tax on their profits. So everything is based upon that individual. As you get more complex at the legal structure, there's the tax benefits are for the person and for the company. So you're trying to create separation between you and the business once you get more sophisticated with your legal structure. Most small businesses, they either start off as sole proprietor. Some might have general partnerships. It's very similar to a proprietorship because it's just one or two are there are few members involved, or they're a LLC. There's the corporation option, and there's the limited liability partnership. Now, in our Another session will go into a deeper dive of these from a strategic point of view, but I wanted to provide this here to indicate that there are tax benefits and implications for each type of structure, usually ranging from less complex, but everything falls on individual, to ranging to be more sophisticated in structure and having more requirements for compliance. Okay. So, a couple of other taxes that might be applicable depending on the type of business you have. So there's the corporate franchise tax. So if you're a corporation, you file Form D20. If you're unincorporated, remember we talked about if certain legal structures did not have to register, but you still have to file on the tax forms. So if you're unincorporated, it means you don't have an LLC, you're not an LLC, you're not a corporation. You will need to file your D30 form. So legal structure determines, you're telling the DC government is what's the ownership, and that legal structure does not bar you from taxes, but it may, it influences the type of tax documents you will need to file and the types of taxes you'll be required to pay. There's a ballpark fee because as a result, the Major League moving back to the city. For businesses at least 5 million in gross receipts, I put that here just to indicate that small businesses do become big businesses. And so you might think that's a dream, but it's indeed possible in the city. So as your revenue grows, your tax implications also grows, okay? And if you're an organization, a business that participates in special events as a vendor, or if you are the promoter, there are requirements for paying the sales tax on items that are sold at events, and then promoters have certain requirements they must meet in submitting vendor and exhibitor lists to the Office of Tax and Revenue before and after an event. So if it's in your strategy to offer special events as a way to reach customers, or to reach the way to increase your market share or market reach, just know there's tax implications associated with it. And then lastly here, I inserted just if you are a partnership, that they have not left that group out as well. They have a special form called T65 in which you will be reporting your taxes. And this is unless you're required to complete one of the other forms, the D30 or D20. All right. So as we've covered so far, registration is about legal ownership structure, has tax implications. Here's one thing I wanted to add. If it's as an optional, it's not required, but if you are operating your business, regardless of the legal structure, and you are using a fictitious name, you'll have to submit a trade name application. And this allows you to use a fictitious name for your business. There's a TN1 form. It's also submitted to DCRA. If your strategy for your business growth is that that trade name is so special, and you want it to be a service mark or a trademark, and you want to elevate it to intellectual property, that's going to be at the federal level. So I just included that it's going to be at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The trademark, service marks, copyrights, and patents, that's where those are submitted. So it's a quite different procedure between trade name and trademarks. Okay. And then I already mentioned about the clean hand certificate, but just to close out here, as part of the registration, if you are pursuing government contracts or in the government contracting world, you probably already have a SAMS number. You do have to check it to make sure it is current. And so if you're doing business with it, you either need to get a number, or you have to make sure your SAM number is current. Okay. And at this moment, I just want to take a pause and see if there are any questions. And I'll start my video back up. Monica, any questions submitted so far?
No questions submitted yet.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll just keep going. I'm sorry. I clicked forward too much. Okay. So what we covered was just the registration parts, and that's once you have done all of that, you've kind of told DC government what are you doing in terms of the business's legal structure. You have it that will trigger all of your tax implications, but that's only one portion of the requirements you need to maintain for DC government. Next, you need to investigate what licenses do you need, what requirements and other permits you might need for your business type and activity. All right, so oops. I'm sorry, I just kind of clicked through there. Okay, so for DC government, they have what's called the basic business license. And there are many categories of business licenses based upon business type. So having that NICS code is going to be critical to identifying which one is right for you. I've provided the list of just basic requirements that need to be submitted with your business license application. So the corporate registration. So the items we just talked about in terms of submitting your legal and ownership structure, you're going to get a document saying that yes, this is an LLC, yes, this is the corporation. You will supply that documentation if it's applicable. You will supply your tax registration, so the FR 500. You have your EIN number. You'll supply that as well. There's the actual basic business license application, and they have an easy form for those who are pretty straightforward, and they identify what companies fall into that category. You'll have your clean hand certification. So you will have submitted that, and you'll get that affidavit back saying you don't owe DC government more than $100. So that will be accompanied. And then you have your resident agent appointment form. So here is where you are designating who is the resident agent for your organization. You're going to include your certificate of occupancy. We're going to get to that a little bit later. As well as any other supporting documents that are required for that license category. So there's a variation of what needs to be submitted based upon your business activity. So your type of business dictates the type of license that's required. And so with that being said, you have a few occupations and professions that have special licenses that may be needed. The basic business license might be needed in addition to occupational and professional licensing. So here are the list of those occupations that are overseen by DCRA. So anywhere from architecture to athlete agents to tour guides and security, CPAs, funeral directors, they would be there's a separate application for each one of those professions. Now, based upon the type of business you have and the business activity, there may be additional licensing agencies you might need to contact. For instance, if you're dealing with alcohol, there's the Alcohol Beverage Regulation Administration. If you're in the field of healthcare and providing health services, there are certain occupations and health services that are regulated by the Department of Health Regulation and Licensing Administration. If you're dealing with schools, higher ed programming, etc., OSCE oversees through their commission licensing. So the key to knowing what licenses you need for your business is understanding, number one, your legal and ownership structure, and number two, your business type, along with the products and services. Those will determine the type of business licenses you will need to acquire. Now, in addition to the license, you may need additional permits. Number one being a certificate of occupancy, in which there are actually 6 different types of applications. And I included them here because if you're the building owner, and not just operating a business in a particular structure, you are responsible for those certificate of occupancy. So just keep that in mind if you're acquiring property and operating a business within that property. But if you're leasing to operate your business, you probably will not need to apply for a certificate of occupancy as long as your business type and activity match the intended use of the CFO for that particular building. And as a result, you can just request a copy from the building owner or property management company. So that's a critical step. You need to get a copy because for some of other activities, you want to submit for certification, other special programs, they might want a copy of it. And even though you're not the owner of the building, you still need to have a copy of that COA on hand. Now, on the other side of things, if you're not leasing space and you're operating your business from your home, you're still required to have an occupancy permit. It's called the home occupancy permit. And it's for those who live in this DC. So you must live in DC and where your business is being operating from. It must be your primary residence. Just know, as you move forward in growing your business, there's various other types of permits that are needed in addition to just the occupancy permit, and they might be involving other agency in DC government. So just keep that in the back of your mind if you're thinking about making very dramatic changes in your organization. So I just kind of included a few very common ones that you might come across, but I highly recommend you do a search on DCRA's website. They have a permit wizard and other search tools that really narrow down on what you're doing, what is required. But if you're doing any construction or demolishing, of course, you're going to need building permits. There's a plats permit for getting official drawn up maps of your location with the property lines. There are the trade permits. So if you have any work done to property, to install, replace electric or gas, plumbing, etc. So you might not be required to get that permit, but if you're hiring contractors to do work, they will have to be able to access those permits. But one thing to note, if you have a building or even if you're leasing and you want to put up a sign for your business, exterior sign, you will need a sign permit. And it includes signs that are for advertising. Sometimes people are rather surprised if there's a signage permit. So just keep that in mind, particularly as many organizations, companies thinking about moving back to their building or now leasing space. As things try to go back to where we're getting out and about again. Just keep that in mind because these are all added expenses for the for your company to apply for a permit. And then next is the public space permit. So if you're using or installing structures in public space, you need to get permission to do so. And it includes any like eateries. And so there's actually a special permit called a sidewalk cafe permit. Right? Yeah, sidewalk cafe. Sounds nice right about now in the middle of a pandemic. But just know there are requirements to be able to do that because you are using public space, and that will be the sidewalk. Okay. So those are just some highlights of the most common permits companies will need to pull for your business. But one thing, if you don't remember anything else, if you can just be mindful of this, that after you apply for your registration, you get your license, and you apply for the permit, it's awarded. There are post-licensing and permit requirements you need to adhere to. Okay, so you need to be mindful. It's not over once you get the email saying here is your permit, license, registration, everything's complete. Number one, you got to pay the taxes associated with your business. Everything has a renewal, including the license, the registration. So your calendar will be your best friends. I recommend to clients as soon as they get there, if they revise their business registration, they apply for the license, to put the renewal date into their calendar either associate with their email or on their phone so they can get a reminder when the next year rolls around, because the year goes rather quickly. So you want to make sure you are not missing any deadlines regarding renewals. Also, post license and permits, there might be other steps you need to carry out, such as inspections. This is mostly for those who have building space, but I put the example here of a hotel and a motel. Once you obtain the license, you have up until a year to get the inspection, because I wanted to highlight that inspection and other activities might be with another DC government agency. So in this case, it would be with the fire marshal. Also, there are reporting requirements. So for example, not only for your registration license, for instance, might be renewals, but for the corporation division at DCRA, you have to submit reports, biannual reports. It's called the BR25 report form, registration by the April 1st, and then every 2 years thereafter. So you must be mindful that operating a business, not just in DC, but most jurisdictions, there's an ongoing engagement with the various agencies that you had to contact with to get started. Okay. Also, be mindful that if you're adding or changing a business activity, it may require you not only to have a new license, you might look to see if your business registration needs to change, because you do identify the type of business that you have in your registration, ownership, legal documents. So just be mindful. Changes in the business may also be changes in its requirements. So you have to make sure that you're checking these items on a regular basis. And then pay very close attention to the post-license permit instructions that are sent to you from the licensing or permit agency. Is that sometimes we're so excited that we got something done, particularly online, that we disregard the attachments or the body of the email with whatever we paid for, whether it's registration or license, whatever the case may be. But that post license permit information is going to be critical, because it's going to identify your reporting requirements, your renewals, and it's going to indicate if there are any other things you need to do based upon your business type. Sometimes it's sent in a follow-up email, particularly in the pandemic, everybody's virtual. And then other times these things are posted on the portal or website for the agency. So you have to make sure you're staying in contact with that agency. You want to make sure your contact information is current with that agency, as well as the registered agent contact information is up to date. So they might send something to you via email. They might use snail mail. Yes, they still use that. Many agencies, sometimes it is a requirement for them to document that they've done their job is by sending it via mail. So till everything's virtual on that end, you must maintain that the appropriate mailing or physical address to receive whatever notices to maintain compliance. Okay. And so on this slide, I put together a list of resources that highlighting all of the items that we just talked about for our registration. This is anywhere from the DCRA Small Business Resource Center, the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development, Office of Tax and Revenue has its Business Service Center. The IRS has a Self-Employed Tax Center. Patent and Trademarks also has services for inventors and entrepreneurs. And then the Economic Partnership, they're doing DC Doing Business Guide and the Small Business Administration. I highly recommend that if you're making changes to as you operate your business, that it's quite all right to call them. If you can transact business via their portal, but it's always good to talk to them if you have questions. I've actually been rather surprised how very, very helpful they can be when you speak to them if you have an issue. Second to that, make sure you sign up for the agency email list or the newsletter. It's very informative to get kind of news, the heads up of what you need to do. in the regular communication via email. I must tell you, I've actually get the IRS newsletter, which I thought was going to be a pain. And it was quite informative, as they regularly give really good information about information that's applicable to entrepreneurs and small business owners. So I highly recommend that you stay connected to these agencies. So just don't think about it as it's only a transactional kind of a relationship. You stay connected. Okay. All right, another break here. Just a quick check-in of any questions. Pop back on the video.
No questions, but Kate did place in the chat that she'll be happy to help anyone that needs to get routed to the right place. And so everyone just make sure you check the chat for Kate's information.
Wonderful. And that's exactly the kind of assistance that I'm talking about. I was on another webinar where a couple of other DC government agencies were involved, and it was about small businesses, and they all eagerly posted their email contact information if anybody had questions. So please do not underestimate the type of assistance you can get by being in contact directly with the agency. I know some have a tendency to want to pay someone to do all of this. That's not necessary at all times, unless you're a mega company and you just don't have the time. The agency have gotten really good at being interactive and helping people get their business off the ground and stay in business. It's so critically important. So I have to give local DC government credit for that. I've been really impressed in the last few weeks of all the interactions I've had with them. So with no questions, we'll just move on then. So we've covered, yes, Spalding, I'm sorry.
No, I would actually like us to, touch base with the individuals who have joined us.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, who we have here in terms of businesses or potential businesses. I see Evelyn Sands. We'll just go around the room and ask everyone to introduce themselves and, tell us about their business or business idea and see what they have learned so far.
Sure, I'll let you lead that. Go ahead.
Evelyn, how are you doing? Would you like to share?
Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. This is Evelyn. I'm the creator of Destined to Spark. Originally, I had a different name, so I'm in a process of changing my name. And that's why I joined this group, because I was like, how do I go about doing it since I already registered? Like, where do I start from now? So that's why I'm basically here. Like, is it going to be some fees associated with me changing my name or whatnot? So I need those answers.
Got it. Thank you. Alexis Fu. Vaughn Lee. We'll move on and come back to Alexis. Robin Clark.
Hi, my name is Robin Clark. So I'm kind of interested in knowing how to set up, because as you guys mentioned before, somebody was telling me that I could go through LegalZoom and have them to do all of this. And then I got recommendations that no, there are things that you can do on your own to try to set up my business for looking into baking and stuff like that. So that's why I'm here now and in the process of doing this.
Did you say baking?
Yes.
As in cakes and whatnot? Okay. That I like the sweet stuff. So hey.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
This is a passion of mine. This is something I love. I am a federal government employee, but I am looking to retire. I cannot wait in 3 years and 11 months. So,
Congratulations.
Good for you. Good for you.
yes.
Count down.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we have Miss Vaughn in here who's having technical audio issues, and she's looking to start a notary service business.
gained in popularity the last 3 years, actually. Notary. Particularly electronic.
Nice, nice. And the great thing, everyone, about this series is that at the end of the series, we'll be doing some one-on-one sessions with Dr. Walker, and then the Congressite Small Business Team will be working with you very closely to make sure that you guys reach your small business goals, whether it's, you know, starting the bakery or you know, improve changing the business name. Moray, Shanisha.
Hey, I'm just on here just to get some ideas. I have a few ideas. So I would like to get my notary license, and I'm interested in starting a vending machine business. And I'm not sure if you guys heard of the pilot business. I just want to be acclimated to when I do jump out there, I know what to do moving forward. I have a few ideas of what I want to do. Right now, I'm currently not working, so I just have free time on my hand just to invest in myself and try to get the ball rolling.
Great, great. Thank you for joining. Yeah. All right, Dr. Walker. it's all you.
Okay. Monica, anybody had questions they might have posted since we did intros? Okay.
No
Wonderful.
questions yet.
And just to highlight that, you know, if you do need one-on-one assistance, that will be made available. So you don't feel like you have to memorize everything in this presentation, because I'll be providing some checklists and some helpful guides as we move forward. So, you know, you will not be alone in getting this all done. Okay. So I will move forward then. We're right on time, actually. Perfect. So insurance policies and financial records, and I kind of put these all together because they have some overlapping. You'll see the interactions that are required as a result. And so I just want to start off by saying that your insurance requirements, again, is going to be based on the type of business you have, as well as the federal and state laws. And so there are some instances rather that DC government has far more stringent laws than the federal government. So you just need to be mindful of that. And you operate your business, and as your business grows, particularly as you bring on employees, that changes the requirements you have to meet. So just some basic business like insurance coverages that you might need to have, again, based upon your business type. Number one, you're going to start off with liability. And that's general business that's just going to try to protect you from claims against your business. And this could be anywhere from someone saying they had an injury to you know, reputation loss, etc. So it can be, the policies can have a very wide range. You can have a general liability policy, or you can have what's called an umbrella, which has a far more broader coverage. Of course, it means it's more expensive, but based upon your type of business, it might be what is commonplace in your industry, or you might need just a general liability policy. The next one to be mindful of is that if you produce products, you might need product liability, particularly if you're going to be making things, because you got to understand you have to cover yourself in case there is some injury or a problem that you cause the customer. That the kind of liability coverage will be protected for you and your business. If you're more on the services side of things, such as I am, and so for those of you who might be starting a notary business, you might have professional liability coverage with errors and omissions, meaning that it covers you in case you make a mistake because you left out something in a contract or missed a step or something like that. That's the kind of coverage you will have for those types of service type professions. And then there's other liability coverages, and as years go by, they're going to change and get more sophisticated. So for instance, you have one for crime. So if you or your business has been a victim of some criminal element, there's coverage for that. There's coverage of cyber, which is growing in popularity. If you all know about maybe some data breach, it was on the news recently, Facebook leaking privacy information. So there's coverage for that kinds of incidents. And then there's like something called excess liability. And then that just is an added on to your coverage, and it gives you additional limits. And so for most, that might not be something that's necessary, but I thought I'll bring it up here because there's a lot you need to discuss with your potential insurance agent about what options you have that will be well suited for your business. But at minimum, you will need some type of liability coverage. Again, based upon your business, you may need commercial property or commercial auto insurance coverage. So if the business owns property, you might want to have that covered. If you have automobiles and you use it for the business's purpose, solely for the commercial use of the business, then there's auto coverage for that as well. Then there's life, health, and disability. These are all separate categories, but I just wanted to place them here together because if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, meaning it's just one of you that owns the entire company, you might just have individual health coverage or disability insurance, both short and or long term. Or you might have a key person life insurance. So I wanted to just put a note on key person life insurance. And this is a life insurance policy that you're covering somebody very important to the business in the event of the untimely death and the business was in the middle of commercial activity. Those funds can be used to put back into the business to help it through any hard times as a result of that person passing away. So that is usually called key man life insurance, but to be inclusive, I call it key person. So if you're the business owner and you're the sole person running the business, you have to think about what coverage do you need to have in order to help your business in the event something happens to you. If you have employees, then you start talking about group health and group life and group disability insurance plans. And there are insurance brokers that can walk you through that. But that's only after you're getting employees on board. Many of you are probably not there. That most companies, small businesses, like 90-some% of them, it's just one person or a husband and wife team or just a small group of co-founders. So you want to pay really close attention to what kind of life, health, and disability coverage you have in order to protect the business. Next is business interruption and continuation. So this is a coverage that replaces income that will be lost in the event there is some loss or damage as a result of fire, natural disaster, or something of that sort. Very important. Remember, I know in the midst of a pandemic, we tend to think of COVID being the most catastrophic thing, and it has been devastating for our economy. But we also have to be mindful there are other events that can interrupt your business and have done in various parts of the city for a variety of reasons. We don't always talk about natural disasters, but there was a time you got significant blizzard weather during winter. We are on the East Coast, so there's still a chance of a hurricane hit. As you saw this past winter, there was a freak ice storm and cold weather in Texas. So there are a lot of things that can interrupt your business. So you want to consider the option, exploring those kinds of policies to protect you there, particularly if they're commonplace in your area. Okay. So then we have workers' compensation. So like I said before, once you start hiring employees, it changes what all your requirements are. So one of the things you'll have to think about is workers' compensation. And this is for coverage and to provide medical wage benefits due to injury on the job. So if an employee has injury on the job, this is to cover their expenses and replacement of wages. Some other insurance coverage that come up quite often. So if you're home-based, you're not exempt, although you might want to check with your homeowners or renters insurance policy to see if your home-based activity is also covered under that policy. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And then if not, there is a separate home-based insurance policy that you can get. There's flood insurance, and you might not think, oh, I don't need this, but you got to think about it. DC is it's on the river. We get a significant amount of flooding in this metropolitan area. not as prevalent as before, but it does occur. So you might want to see where your location of your business is to see if you are in a flood hazard area, and then factor in if the cost of getting that insurance is needed, because it's a possibility it may happen. Bonding is usually reserved for those construction type businesses. So this is an added level of insurance where you're protecting the customer, the third party that hired the business. And for some reason, you're unable to fulfill the contract or fulfill the work. The work might be incomplete, there may be damage, loss, theft, or other failures. And being bonded allows you to cover for if you're unable to can carry out the work. And so this is why you see on a lot of construction companies on the side of the truck, they'll say licensed, bonded, and insured, because it's another level of insurance to protect their customer. And so go back to our initial slide of building trust with customers. It's highly unusual that a construction company will be hired if they don't have a bond. Highly unusual. So be mindful of the industry and what is expected in terms of your type of coverage. In the construction industry, it is expected that you will be bonded. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that the insurance requirements, many of the requirements are tied to employment and employees. So I just wanted to add in here the employment and labor laws. And like I said, that DC Doing Business guide from the Economic Development Partnership did a great job of outlining this. So I just highlighted some key points here. So once you hire employees, the compliance requirements goes up. So the first thing to consider is the wages. So there is a DC Office of Wage Hour. So there is a pay required. You're required to pay minimum wage or living wage. And so if you're in the government contractor space, then you or a subcontract with this government, you might be required to pay the living wage, which is different from minimum wage. And so you got to factor that in as your business grows. And I don't want you to limit yourself and say, oh, I'll never be a government contractor because of the type of business they're in. The government buys all sorts of products and services. And so particularly the federal government. So there's no type of business that is off the table in terms of being able to get a government contract. Some might be more plentiful than others, but just be mindful that you walk into that government contract space, there's other requirements to uphold. Also, when you bring on employees, you're required to have an environment that is safe and healthy for them. So there are some guidelines identified by the federal government, the OSHA, Occupational Safety Administration, as well as DC has their local DC government agency, Occupational Safety and Health. Again, this is going to be important if you're working outside of a leased space or you own your building to house your operations. If you have no employees, you can see this. You might have less requirements, but it's still good practice to have a health and safe environment. There are child labor laws. So there's some restrictions if you hire minors. So no one under 18 can be employed for more than 8 hours in any one day, for 6 consecutive days in any 1 week, or 48 hours in any 1 week. So if you hire the neighborhood, your neighbor friend, or because you know the family a long time, you still have to abide by labor laws. Okay. There are leave requirements, so you're required to give leave under various circumstances. So there's the DC Paid Family Leave Act that grants leave, particularly if it's like someone has had a major health condition. It's a government administrative program, and there's paid family leave as a result. There's unpaid leave on the DC Family Medical Leave, and then there's paid or unpaid leave due to DC parental leave. And you can see that this is really these legislation are trying to protect the employee in the event they need to take time away, whether paid or unpaid, to take care of themselves or other family members. So be mindful of that when you're taking on employees. There are other labor laws regarding human rights, so at the federal level as well as DC local level. And so I just kind of outlined them here, and they range anywhere from, no discrimination of employees, basis of sex, race, color, national origin, and religion. There's equal pay, American disabilities, age discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, sexual harassment. DC has corresponding acts in terms of criminal record, protecting pregnant women, unemployed, anti-discrimination, and fair credit in employment. So as you need more assistance on your one-on-one, we can really go into a deep dive of which of these might be applicable, or actually, what's necessary for your type of business, and what policies and procedures you need to put in place to be in compliance with these acts. But at minimum, there's some information you'll have to display as a result of being an employer. These are posters that you can get readily, that might be posted, that have to be posted in an area that is accessible by employees, so they are aware of all their rights under these various laws. So this is the minimum requirement from DC government. Because of these insurance coverage as well as compliance with local or federal law, you need to have internal policies to support your compliance effort with these laws. So it's one thing there to be a law, it's one thing to have insurance requirement, but until you document it and train your employees on the policies and procedures, it's very difficult for you to maintain compliance, and then you could find yourself in deep trouble because you're not focusing on the client aspect. So I just highlighted some main ones that I see on a regular basis, or there's some common practices that are expected for today's business owner. So number one, I just highlighted for the accounting, you need to have some internal controls regarding bills and invoicing, like who gets the bill, who pays it, who has the authority to approve an expense, and who has the authority to invoice for payment, etc. You need to have controls on who has access to bank accounts or credit cards. So there's just some minimum accounting procedures you need to have in place. Now, if it's just you and you're the sole owner, whether you have an LLC or you're a sole proprietor, it doesn't mean you don't have these policies. You just need to be mindful of your practices, because you want to keep things in order and not just do them ad hoc or any given way at any given time. So policies are good even if it's just you. And there's for the employees, there are various policies to protect them around discrimination, health and safety standards, confidentiality, etc. For the customer related, at minimum, you want to have payment and refunds. You got to let people know how are you expected to be paid, and then what if I don't like the service? What is the refund policy? There are expectations around terms of use and privacy policies for your website. Critical to have those in place, because people need to know how are you using the data and information that you collect from on your website. And even if it's just you as a business owner, be mindful. If you have a website, you need to pay attention to that. Your contracts and sales agreements. So for the young lady who wants to start up, do the baking services, what's the sales agreement? How does somebody, confirm, yes, I ordered a cake and I wanted this on it, and when do they pay and how do they pay? And it may not be extensive, but you need to have what will be the kinds of agreements you need to complete a sale. Marketing communications, there are some requirements around if you have a listserv, we've all seen it, customers have to have the ability to opt in or opt out. And then there's a lot of best practices around advertising, because you want to be accurate. You don't want to be misleading, because again, that will destroy trust, as well as it may take you out of compliance. All right. For the financial records, I started number one, you need to have your financial statements. You need to have current financial statements, at least 3 to 5 years. Now, if you're just starting a business or you've only been at it for a year or so, you at least need to go, you got to start off quarterly then. And then so you're building up a time period where you have 3 to 5 years of accurate, ready to go financial statements. And when I say financial statements, I'm referring to profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. Now, just keep in mind in our session 4, we're going to talk a lot about the money, and we go into the details of all of that in the session 4 of the boot camp. So don't worry, we'll be going to those details, but just know those are the 3 basic financial statements you need to have for your business. Next is the tax records, both personal and business tax returns, and all the attached schedules. So if it's just you, and let's say you own the LLC, the IRS is going to treat you like a sole proprietor. That's just their way. And so your business tax returns are going to be attached to your personal tax returns. It's going to be called a Schedule C. So you not only need the front few pages of your business, your personal return, but also your associated attachment for the business side. And then you're going to have your IRS account. I don't know if you know, but the IRS, you can have an account online that tells you about your taxes owed, request payment plans, and you can request transcripts. So it's quite similar to your OTR DC tax account. Other records to keep in mind is payroll. We talked a lot about the employee requirements, inventory, because inventory equals money, property. So if you own any property, both in terms of the building a larger assets, but remember there's a personal property tax that the business has to pay. So you need to keep records of that. And then if you are a corporation that offers stocks, most companies don't, most small businesses don't, but if you do, if you go down that road, it's far more complex. So you need to have your stock ledger, and you need to keep track of all your board meeting minutes, because that's where you're making all of your decisions about the finances of the business. Just to highlight here, you got to have all your bank account information, credit profiles, both personal and business. I have another slide that outlines both of those. And don't forget any social media accounts in which you might have financial information linked to your social media accounts. So for instance, if you have Instagram, Facebook, you might have an advertising account that has credit information. You might have an e-commerce account, like if you use Shopify, and you might have financial information linked to those as well. So you got to make sure those are accurate and you have access to those records. Keep in mind all account logins and passwords you need to keep secure, because you'll be at risk of identity theft and other risks if you don't have controls over the access to these various accounts. And just to kind of close out here, I just included a slide here of all the credit bureaus and reports and scores. So some of us might be more familiar with the personal side of things, but just know there's business credit reporting. The most popular, the most well-known probably is the Dun and Bradstreet, because many government contracts or government contracting processes will ask you for your Dun and Bradstreet number. And that's really your number representing that business credit profile. But there's also Experian and Equifax. These credit bureaus also have their own credit scoring separate from your personal credit scores. And I just put an example of a few of them here. There are others that are you might want to be mindful of, but I just included the major ones. So as you're running your business, you need to have a close eye and understanding of your personal financials as well as your business finances. So I just included on the personal side of things that you are entitled to one free credit report per year. You should order that every year. You won't get the credit score because the legislation was passed before credit scoring was, such an integral part of our financing. But you should at least get your credit report, because in the early part of your business, depends on the industry, between 3 to 7 years, everything might be based upon your personal credit history until the business builds up enough of its own credit history. Okay, so keep that in mind. You need to clean up your own personal finances in order for your business to have a solid financial standing. Next is so your personal credit scoring. There's FICO and Vantage. So there's the two most popular. That is not to say there might be others. Vantage came out 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, because at the time FICO was the big. Everybody knew FICO. So these are proprietary products from credit bureaus. So they might be other ones, scores that may come out. So they're not necessarily on our behalf, but they are for other institutions to make decisions about whether or not to lend you money. Another system, a credit bureau you might not be aware of is a check system, which is a nationwide specialty consumer reporting agency that tracks all your closed checking and savings account information. Again, you are entitled to a free copy of the report every 12 months. But if a bank closes an account on you because you are in default or whatever, that's reported to the check system. So if somebody wants to do business with you, they may check the check system to see how you manage your banking accounts. So please do keep that in mind. All right. I just included a slide here on this COVID implications. As you can see, it's still very fluid in what's going on with COVID, but you can see if you're doing testing or you're providing masks and PPE or you have to upgrade your ventilation, that all has implications on, do you need a permit to do that? It all has implications on employee consent and disclosure. So any of the things you might be doing as the economy slowly reopening up, you need to check with the various agencies to see if there are any specialty requirements you might need to meet. And I included here some resources for the legal side of things, because most of those questions that we just covered will fall in the legal. So there's the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, and George Washington has the Small Business Law Clinic, as well as a couple of area university have different law clinics on small business topics. So there is free assistance for small business owners to get some of those questions answered on the insurance, legal, and financial side of things. Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts at this time? I'll turn the video back on.
No questions yet, BP,
Okay.
in the chat.
Well,
like this.
Okay. Well, we're at the end. So I would like to thank all the supporters and funders of Congress Heights Community Training and Development Corporation, so the Department of Small Business and Local Business Development, as well as the CHCTD. So thank you for their support to provide this opportunity to you. And just a reminder to sign up for the next bootcamp session. So we went over organization. Our next session will talk about building the customer base. And next week we'll talk about strategy and managing the money. Okay. So in 4 quick sessions, you will have covered most of what you need to get your business up to the next level that you need at this time of the pandemic. I know it's challenging, but it can be done. And here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. But I'm sure Congress Heights Community Training Corporation and Development Corporation is going to be providing you access to one-on-one sessions. So we'll make those arrangements for you. So if you want to do a deep dive for your business, we're here for you. But I just want to feel free to email me if you have any questions. That's all I have, Monica and Baldwin. Anything else you guys want to add?
Baldwin, you want to do the closeout?
That was great. I actually don't have anything else to add. I just encourage everyone to join us for the next session on Thursday, same time. We'll definitely send out the slides by tomorrow afternoon so that you guys will be able to access everything and review the information on your own time also. All righty. And
if you need additional information, please feel free to reach out to Congress Heights and they'll get it to me and I'll do the research on my end. And I look forward to meeting all of you on one-on-one if you need the help. So, let's make this happen for everybody.
Thank you.
Ms. Monica has a question. Yes, the recording will be made available on our website, chctdc.org, under our small business tab, just the same. And we'll
Hold
send
on.
that link also.
I'm about to announce that to you as soon as it downloads.
Yes. All righty.
Right.